Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Lindsay. This is Ryan Powell. We wanted to thank you for taking some time out to join us for our first Manta webinar. If this goes well and if there's an appetite from our current and prospective investors, we'll do more of these. We'll need your feedback to determine whether or not this is a good thing or not. But I'd also like to take a moment to thank everyone of our investors. I know we have a lot of investors from our Republic raise that have joined us. So thank you for your past support. Thank you for being part of Team Manta. I'd also like to thank the folks who have joined recently through Start Engine, and especially the folks who were with Republic raise and now have rejoined us in supporting us with our Start Engine raise. So thanks everyone for that. The other comment that I will make is that we are recording this for anyone who is unable to join us. It will be posted on the Start Engine website for folks to visit later. Maybe if you've got nothing going on your Saturday and you're looking for something fun to do, this could be for you. But I suspect you might have other things in the hopper. Just a little bit about the format for this afternoon. What we'd like to do is we have a brief presentation. Ryan and I want to give you a little bit more background about ourselves, a little bit more background about Manta, about our technology. We'll then spend some time talking about our foray into the water pollution remediation market, why we think that's a good idea, why we think that's a good fit for Manta. Then we're going to jump into Q&A. We've got a big chunk of time dedicated for Q&A. We generated a lot of great questions from our registrants as part of the registration. We've got dozens of questions. We've tried to coalesce those into some themes. We'll cover those during the Q&A session, as well as we will open it up to live Q&A via appropriately the Q&A function on your Zoom bar there. So the plan there, we'll open it up. You guys can send some questions in. If something we haven't already addressed, then we'll try to cover it there. All right. So with that, let me share my screen and we'll talk a little bit about Manta here. Morgan, can you see that okay? Okay. All right. So again, welcome. We're going to jump right into it. We'll start sort of the CV part of the meeting. This is sort of a perfunctory introduction. So again, I'm Chris Lindsay. I'm the CEO for Manta. I joined the company back in November of 2021. Prior to that, I spent about 30 years in my career in biotech. I started off at the bench in R&D functions, and then the last 20 years or so in the business side. I would say I've been fortunate enough to work with a variety of different companies, some very small startups, maybe not as small as Manta is, but some very small startups, all the way up to large multinationals with 20,000 plus employees. I've had the benefit of sort of seeing what works at various levels, what doesn't work at various levels, and hopefully we're able to bring some of those learnings and apply those to Manta as we grow it. I would say most notably for me, something I'm most proud of within my career, I worked for a company called Martech Biosciences. Great story. I won't belabor that now, but it was a spinoff from Martin Marietta. I joined, as employee number 31. We too were looking at microalgae as an opportunity, looking at a variety of different markets. We identified a particular application where a strain of algae made an important nutrient for brain and eye development in infants. It was in breast milk. It's found in breast milk naturally, but wasn't found in infant formula in the 1990s and early 2000s. Martech basically commercialized that idea, completely developed it to the point today where DHA, the nutrient's called DHA. It's found in just about every infant formula in the United States and most of the world. I'm proud to say that I played a small part in the development of that nutrients, and there's over 250 million babies who have benefited from that. I was also part of the executive leadership team for Martech when we were acquired by DSM in 2010. for 1.2 or 1.1 billion for the exit. So I think that's the most that's also a relevant piece for folks on the line here. So with Ryan.
Hi, I'm Ryan, and I am the founder and CTO of Manta. So well, it looks like a lot, but I have about 20 years of experience in science and technology. Got my PhD from University of Maryland. Went to Ohio State for my undergrad. I was out at University of Washington for a little while doing research. And I started this company as something that grew out of my PhD, and I'm disappearing. That's another skill that I have. So I lead technical development at Manta, and I've been there since the very beginning, before the beginning. And so we'll get into a bit more as we go through about my background.
Great. And now I think probably, at least for me, something more important, sort of the real background on us. So just a little background on myself. I'm a Marylander, born and bred. For me, Chesapeake Bay water are life. So being part of that and having that part of my life, it's just sort of, that's how I would define myself. I'm fortunate enough, a great wife, and I have two wonderful daughters. Oldest daughter is actually in the Navy. She's finishing up medical school. My youngest daughter is finishing up her biology degree at University of Maryland. As a former science guy, I'm especially proud to say both my girls are in the STEM field. So you know, we as a family, you know, we sort of have this mantra of trying to, you know, to do good, to make the world a better place. Certainly, I hope I can do my small part with Manta and make the difference here. So that's something that's important to me.
All right, and so a little bit about my background. I have kind of a unusual background. So I grew up on a 2,000-acre grain farm in Ohio, and this is actually a picture. Hopefully everyone can see the mouse. This is actually a picture of my family farm in Ohio, and as you can see, it is very flat there. But you're looking out over about 100 acres of one of our fields. So I was born basically with a wrench in my hand, I would say, and so I can definitely turn a wrench. But I also have this other bit, my technical training as a scientist. This is me doing some PhD work. I'm just as comfortable turning a wrench as I am splicing DNA. And so I have kind of that combination of both a technical background and a practical background that I bring together in Manta. And so how the company kind of got started was one day I was working in the lab, and I was trying to solve a problem. And so my PhD was around using a bacterium, believe it or not, to actually try to harvest algae, to get the algae out of the water. And one thing I knew right away about this is that this was going to be way too expensive. My PhD advisor, he loved it, but I knew in practice, getting back to, again, the kind of pragmatic, practical background, is going to be way too expensive. So I was trying to figure out, how can I make this cheaper? And so I tried attaching magnetic particles onto these bacteria so I could reuse them over and over again. And being a good scientist, one of the things I did is I ran a control experiment with just the particles. And what I found, surprisingly, is that the particles themselves actually worked better than what I was trying to do. And that's how it often goes in science. And so what you're looking at is kind of the very first result, taking the algae out of the water and getting this nice clear water. And so with that and a few other puzzle pieces, when they slot into place, I realized that I had something, and I didn't want it to just kind of sit around in the lab. And like Chris, you know, one of the main things that gets me up in the morning is, you know, trying to do something good, trying to make the world a little bit better place. And so when I decided to start the company, my wife was very pregnant at that point. And so we're starting this company, this very risky venture from zero. And my wife, fortunately, is very supportive of this. And this is my family. This is Carrie, my wife, and my two little girls, Kaylee and Taylor. And those little girls are a large part about what motivates me kind of day in and day out. So we got the company started, and There's not a lot of money. You even have to hire child labor here. This is actually Kaylee when she was much younger, overseeing operations here. We're working on an early prototype. And this is me again, early stage company. You got to get your hands dirty. And this is one of our early stage continuous flow prototypes. And I'm happy to say that we've taken everything from working with these tiny tubes, about a 1 milliliter, to our fully automated machine that can actually take and produce harvest algae and clean water for tens of thousands of gallons every day with very little input. And so kind of historically, we have this 3-step algae to oil process. So we developed all these different bits that are solutions where we grow the algae, harvest it, and convert it to renewable crude oil. And so we grow the algae in open ponds, growing wild algae. We use our proprietary magnetic harvesting technology to actually pull that algae out of the water. I hope we can get rid of this. Hold on just 1 second. There we go. We're going to get rid of me disappearing. There we go. Hopefully that's a little bit better. All right, and so we use our magnetic separation technology to pull the algae out of the water, concentrate it, convert it to renewable crude oil with a process called hydrothermal liquefaction. It's quite a mouthful, but essentially it's a continuous flow pressure cooker that converts that algae to a renewable crude oil. And so for our Republic investors out there, we closed out our last round. We're very excited with all the outpouring of support. And unfortunately, not too long after that, we ran into a problem. And so the problem cropped up in between this harvest step and this conversion step. And so we had proven out all of the individual unit operations, and we were in the process of starting to knit these together with engineering. And we ran into a problem with the outflow from the harvester and the reactor. Now, I don't want to get all the way down into the details, but suffice it to say, one of the problems was that this outflow coming from the harvester was going to eat the stainless steel in our reactor. And when you're working at around 600 degrees and 2000 PSI in an all stainless steel reactor, eating your stainless steel is not the best of things to be shooting for. And about that same time, we got in some of the final numbers for what it would take to scale up to the next stage in our with our reactor. And unfortunately, when we looked at both of those two things together, what we realized is that those two things were going to eat up a very large amount, perhaps all of the money we just raised. And at that point, we wouldn't have any further commercial progress. And so we felt at that point, we still feel that these problems can be solved, but we're trying to be good stewards of everyone's capital. And it's not just your capital that's in there. I have my own money, I have my family's money, friends' money, even my father-in-law has money invested. So believe me, we are trying to be good stewards of capital. And so when we kind of looked at this, we took a step back and we were trying to decide, is this the right pathway to go? And it'd be a very risky pathway to try to go down and solve that problem and then come out the other side and get the money that we needed to keep continuing on. And so we looked at, okay, what do we have? What can we do to start to bring money into the company? What are the other pathways available? And so where we got to is that, well, the core value of the company is actually this harvest step. This is really the secret sauce of the company. This is really the thing that no one else can do. And so just to remind everyone, the way this works, and this is a video, is we can take algae like this, we can add magnetic sand to it, and that sticks to all the algae. You'll see it start to clump up very quickly. And then just as quickly as that, we put it on a magnet and it just basically pulls it all out of the water. And believe it or not, inside the machine, it's actually quicker than that. It's about 5 seconds. And you go from this really dirty kind of water on the left to really nice crystal clear water. And that's what we can do that basically no one else can. And so we looked at that and we said, okay, what can we do? Where can we build value around that? And this is about the point that Chris is coming on board and we're basically reformulating the plan. All right.
Let's go.
Thanks, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we came up with is what we think is actually a better path towards biofuels. And so instead of grow, harvest, convert, what we're doing is grow, remediate, convert. And so instead of growing the algae ourselves, what we can actually do is go out, and there's a lot of places where different organizations have issues with algae. And so they will pay us. The algae is not only free, they will pay us quite handsomely to get the algae out of the water, more than an order of magnitude of the actual value of the algae. And so we're getting paid when we're doing remediation to address the issue, and we get to collect the algae, which we could ultimately use for fuel. And then we can take that and convert it. And so that's what we're doing. So instead of grow, harvest, convert, we are getting algae from that people are growing. That's a problem. We're doing remediation, and we're essentially getting not only better economics, but we're solving two environmental problems at once. We're cleaning water and making renewable fuel. And so I think at this point, I'm going to switch over to Chris.
Sure. All right. So what I'll talk about, so there's a little bit of that should establish a little bit of background around the thinking of, I'll use the word pivot. It's not a complete pivot. We certainly still have ambitions to pursue biofuels, at the time that makes sense. But now we want to spend a little bit more time talking about the remediation market, if you will, water pollution market. And as Ryan said, the magic that we have, the most mature asset that we have within Manta is really around our magnetic harvester. By the way, that's where our patent is. We've got another patent in the works right now. So that's really, our most valuable asset that we have. And there are a variety of other applications, other markets where we can deploy this technology. And we think we have some unique value that can be offered in these various markets. There's obviously the pond and lake remediation piece. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we go through. There's treatment of hazardous algal blooms. Certainly our technology should work there. Wastewater treatment, and that sort of is a fairly broad catch-all, everything from lagoons, wastewater treatment lagoons, all the way up to full-on water treatment, wastewater treatment facilities. We'll talk a little bit about that as we move along. But basically the technology, the magnetic technology allows us to take this really powerful tool and shrink it down and pull out a whole host of potential contaminants. Obviously the algae, but also interestingly, we can pull out phosphorus, which, as many of you probably know, phosphorus is actually one of the drivers that cause the algal blooms. Additionally, outside of that, we can pull out just sediment, suspended solids in general. There's a whole host of actually other applications that we think may be appropriate. To be completely transparent, we have to generate the data on that, but we think there are a variety of other markets where we could deploy this technology even further. So this is where we are today. We spent a big chunk of the first part of 2022 basically taking a technology that was sort of purpose built for us to use out in our own pond and transform that into something that we could then deploy and use it as a commercially viable system. And so we took it from our own sort of purpose built structure. We're able to shrink that technology and fit it into an 8.5 by 16 foot trailer. We can take this trailer basically anywhere where you can get a trailer into, and we've already pulled it into a variety of different tight spots. We have our own power source. We basically roll up and probably within a half hour to 45 minutes have the system set up, and probably within depending on the water, we can have it tuned in, running, and start cleaning within 2 to 3 hours. After that, basically the system will run and run. That is, when you think about that compared to some of the competitive technologies that are out there, one of the obvious ones in the waste treatment space is just a large wastewater treatment facility. Obviously, they're hugely capital intensive. A lot of smaller communities that may need them to hit their wastewater targets don't have the wherewithal, the resources in terms of CapEx or OpEx to be able to put one of those in place. So that's really an interesting niche where we can slide in, provide a very quick solution, not only for longer term issues, but if somebody's got, for example, somebody's got, an algal bloom that's out of control, out of nowhere, we can come in and resolve that in fairly short order. The other thing I just would want to touch on is the scalability of the technology. Again, right now we're working, we get everything on an 8.5 by 16-foot trailer. That's a good size for us, particularly as we're sort of establishing in the market, but we think it's a pretty scalable technology moving forward. Just speaking at high level, you heard me talking about wastewater lagoons and lake management. Just to give you a sense of the opportunity that exists, and I had no sort of understanding of wastewater lagoons until probably earlier this year, late last year. I guess it was late last year. There are over 7,000 wastewater lagoons in the United States. Of those, more than 60% of them have been out of compliance for some reason in the last 3 years. So that's a huge number of lagoons that have been either discharging when they shouldn't be, or have had technical issues that have prevented them from discharging, that has resulted in other issues for different communities. Big market opportunity there. We've spent a lot of time demonstrating our technology within this market. We've had great results. Our technology works, and we think this is a fairly low-hanging fruit for us. The other market, and actually we're going to be doing a trial in a larger wastewater treatment facility in the near future. And the value proposition that we bring there is we actually think that our technology, the magnetic separator technology, can provide a variety of different benefits certainly over standard treatment, but then also there are other companies out there using a magnetic separation or magnetite in their processes, but they can't do it as efficiently and as effectively as we can. So we think there's a real value add there. The other piece is the size and the strength of our system will allow us to fit into places where they may have space limitations. So if you can't build another clarifier pond, which is fairly large in space, and you need to increase your throughput for a system, our system would be an appropriate application there. Then the last piece is obviously the biofuels piece. Massive, massive market. Again, we haven't given up on that path, but we think we've got a better way to get there. And we think we've got a way to get there where we are being more fiscally responsible for our investors, family, friends, certainly everyone on the line here. And we think that's going to be a better way for us to get in there, establish a solid foundation for Manta fiscally, and then we can then build on and move into it in a way that makes sense. Just wanted to give you a sense of some of the traction that we have in the market. For anyone who's been in sales, this is effectively a sales funnel as you're looking from left to right. We've got about a half a dozen or so, if not more, trials that are in the process of being scheduled or coming soon. We've got over 10, 11, I guess approaching 12, a dozen trials that we've completed. By the way, we still believe we're going to convert some of these various prospective customers. Most notably, I would point out there, we just had literally finished up, what's today? Thursday. Tuesday finished up what we found to be a very successful trial with the Maryland Port Authority or Maryland Port Administration, cleaning up one of their enormous containment ponds. So stay tuned. You guys will probably be hearing more about that, on our Start Engine updates. And then last year we had our first revenue for the company through the Columbia Association. So I truly believe that the company, we spent last year getting the technology ready. We now moved into demonstrating the technology in the market, showing that it works. And now I truly believe that we're on the precipice of moving into an opportunity for very strong commercial growth. We're going to get a couple of these jobs to fall, and then we think it's just going to fall into place really nicely. One other thing that I will add from a business perspective, including in some of our upcoming trials, one of our strategic approaches is to actually look at partnering with, there are companies out there that are basically contractors to manage wastewater facilities and water treatment facilities. We think there's some real opportunity to partner with some of these companies as a potential solution, and to basically be an opportunity for us, whether you call it a franchise model or just a partnership to expand geographically. We have a couple of things in the works for that as well. So just the last slide here, and then we'll get into the Q&A piece. Quick time check. I think we're doing okay. This is just a 30,000-foot view of the sense of how we see the next couple of years playing out. Holistically, we see the remediation services really where we are today. This is a chance for us to bring in some revenue near term. It's a chance for us to learn more about the market, the water remediation market, as well as to start seeding the market for potential sales of our, we call them harvesters, but for our water remediation system down the road. And it's also a chance for us to start to build that network of prospective customers from a sales perspective. Then after that, we see sliding into more of a sales function where we start to sell more and more of our harvesters. In addition to that, we will have recurring sales on consumables. So we see that continuing to grow and building a really solid foundation, leveraging our IP. We can start to decrease our costs, continue to decrease our costs, rather. That's obviously going to be a continued priority for us. And then as we get to be more break even financially, which we're hoping could happen the end of 2024, then we can continue to reinvest into the biofuels market. We think there's still a real opportunity, particularly with this new model, that will allow us to be successful there. But that's kind of how we see this playing out. Don't get me wrong, if somebody wants to buy a harvester this year, we'll sell it to them. And same, if things take, a different direction one way or the other, and things can accelerate on the biofuel side, we'll obviously pursue that as well. That's one of the great things about being a small company, is we can be nimble and aggressive there. So that's basically where we are as an organization. With that, I'll shift over into Q&A. Now, with the Q&A, a couple of things. As I mentioned earlier, we got a couple of dozen questions from our registrants. So we'll work through some of those. But then we would certainly encourage everyone on the line here to start putting in questions, if you haven't already, sending in questions through the Q&A button for the Zoom function. So with that, let's open it up the floor for folks to start asking some questions. Let's see here. Let me see if I can get to the point where we have some questions. Let me stop sharing. I'm sorry, everyone, just bear with me here, navigating a bunch of screens. Before we jump into this, we're consolidating some of the questions now. One question I know that a lot of folks had was really around all of our Republic investors are wondering, how do they convert their safes? There are a couple of things that we need to discuss on that. So there are two things that need to happen before your safes, with your Republic safes, will convert. The first thing that has to happen is that Manta, in the agreement, it's up to us whether we actually want to convert to equity. We're going to do that. That's done. That's not an issue. There's another trigger event that is a limitation that will need to be met before we can agree to convert, and that is we have to raise, in this equity round with Start Engine, we have to raise at least $1 million. That's not us. This is not us sitting here saying, hey, we got to raise. This is actually in your agreement before, this is from like 2 years ago. So, so that has to happen. If those two things, if we hit $1 million, then we can, obviously Ryan and I have agreed we want to go forward and convert that to equity. When we hit that and that happens, everything, we had a lot of discussion with Republic. That whole process will be managed via Republic. Basically, once we're ready to convert, they will contact you. The whole process will be orchestrated through them, through their custodial services process. And then at that point, they will walk you through everything and deal with that. That should be fairly straightforward. But again, there's the big caveat of we got to hit $1 million for the start engine raise before that happens. So hopefully, if you haven't invested, you'll consider investing. If you not comfortable with investing or you've already invested, please reach out to your network and try to get some other people on board, spread the word. We need your help to get to that point. So with that, I'm going to see if we can try to get to some questions that have popped up. Do you want to talk about, cover that one?
One second, let's see the rest of it. Bear with us just a second. Yep. Okay, so one of the first questions we have from, I believe it's Sunil. I apologize if I'm butchering your name, which is, how often do wastewater lagoons and or lakes typically need to get algae blooms removed? Okay, so for wastewater lagoons, this is typically a seasonal problem, although some of the demos that we did in 2022, we were working in the dead of winter and they still needed it. But typically what happens is, as the weather warms up, the algae are just plants, just like all other plants. They start to grow better, and then the density gets too high, and that basically messes up that facility's outflow. And if certain levels get too high, then they get dinged by EPA, which can be serious because they can get fines, and if it happens enough, even jail time. So typically this is something that happens in the summer. In general, we'll call it 2 to 3 months. Some facilities year round.
Maybe while you're picking out another one, I'll touch on one that came in through our registration. One of the questions was, will you open the campaign to investment for ex-US investors or international investors? Short answer is yes. That quite candidly, I think, was a mistake on our part. I think we maybe got some bad counsel. Certainly in our Republic raise, we had a very strong international investment pool. So appreciate that. We will be re-upping our Form C registration the end of this month to actually extend our current campaign. And when we do so, our plan is to open it up to international investment at that point too. So yeah, that was, I think in retrospect, I'd like to have that as a do-over. So, but yeah, that's coming.
Yeah. So we got a question from Aaron. It says, are you actually assembling harvesters yourself, or is the assembly construction outsourced? So currently it is completely done in-house. We order different motors, raw materials. We have some automated manufacturing in-house right now. As we scale up, the general plan is that different parts will get outsourced and brought in-house for final assembly.
Maybe you're pulling one, I'll throw another one out here.
Yeah, that seems like a good case.
There was a question that came in, or a couple of times, about an IPO and our timing for an IPO. I can tell you right now, we currently do not have any plans for moving forward with an offering. I would, again, you call me nearsighted, but first thing we want to do is make sure that we get to break even, right? That's just to be completely transparent. That's our first goal. We need to make sure that the company has a very strong financial foundation. We're good to go, and we can control our destiny from there. So that's the first thing. The other thing, as we move forward, ideally, I would prefer to get into strategic partnerships. And I think we need to be realistic about what we can do versus what we can do through a strategic partnership. a JV, some sort of alliance or something like that, or ideally maybe we're acquired by, say, a large wastewater manufacturing company or a treatment equipment company. I think that would be those types of things where we're able to bring more to the table, leverage another potential partner's wherewithal, whether it be their customer network, and or their design and build capabilities.
Yeah, so I got a question from Stefan here. It says, are you open to industry partners to collaborate on biofuel production and help solve some of the technical issues? Absolutely, yes. And so there are, one example of this is there are other companies out there working on hydrothermal liquefaction reactors, HTL just for short. And one thing that Chris and me are kind of hoping is, as we build out the remediation business, some of the other kind of scale up challenges on HTL will be solved, and then we can just simply partner with those companies to basically slot in that solution. So absolutely, yes.
Right. I'll pick another one from the list of registration. Let's see. Other scaling issues, challenges that need to be tackled in addition to the magnetite reuse. I think clearly someone saw our most recent updates about some of our R&D breakthroughs for magnetite recycling. Yes, there are a couple of other significant major technical hurdles that we need to address. A big push for us is to ultimately make our harvester, our machine, as hands-off as possible. So a big push for us will be moving into the automation realm and further increasing automation, increasing the robustness of the operation, if you will. The nice thing about that is, while it may sound a bit daunting, this is one of those things where we have a clear line of sight on how we're going to make a difference there. We already have lots of ideas in terms of how we can and make our harvester continually as hands-off as possible. And that's one of the nice things about us, with the approach that we're taking now, as we're gaining more understanding of the market and what the markets need, I should say markets, what the markets need, that allows us to take that feedback and incorporate that into future designs. We could sit here today and say, yeah, we need a machine that does this, and this. But it may be, frankly, it may be overkill. It may take us too far. It may be too expensive, cut our margins down. So that's one of the nice things about the way we're approaching the market now. But I would say one of the biggest push, an area that we need to continue to push on is our R&D efforts around automation, as well as continued cost reduction. Magnetite is a huge piece of that. So great question, though.
And I think there's a question from Harold here, Harold Gross, that kind of builds off of that. And so he says, so since you mentioned consumables, what are the waste products of your process and how are they disposed of? And so right now we're working on incorporating recycling that magnetite. And so that was basically a smaller scale result that we posted about. What we need to do is then integrate it into the machinery. And part of the reason I mentioned that in terms of waste products is right now that magnetite, when it's done, gets wasted. We're quite confident that we can reuse it. That'll reduce that waste product in terms of how we dispose of it. So for the lagoons, it's kind of interesting because these systems are set up to literally collect that algae and all the other stuff, settle it to the bottom. And so when we've talked to them, they're quite fine with us actually putting that stuff back in the headworks of the lagoon. It settles out. That's no problem with them. Ultimately, what we'd like to do, as we said, is actually pull that algae off in the long term and convert it to fuel. But in the short term, that's what we're doing.
Right. There's one question around marketing plans to grow the business. Actually, a couple of questions around that came in registration. Particularly as it pertains to the water treatment, pollution, wastewater treatment market. There are a couple of approaches that we have and we want to sort of expand upon. Obviously, there's the approach of greater participation in conferences, both from a technical perspective, because I think we have, at the heart of it, we're a science-based company, and so there's some novel science that we would like to go and present at some of these conferences, wastewater treatment conferences. There are lots of equipment shows that we could participate in. We've talked to a number of folks who have given us some insight of where we should go and how we should participate. The other piece that's actually been interesting for us, there's a fair amount that on the wastewater side, the network is tight. So for example, when we were doing some trials here in Maryland, working with different wastewater treatment facilities, everyone knows everybody. So, we were working with a company over on Maryland's Eastern Shore, and they said, hey, did you talk to so-and-so out in Western Maryland? So 4 hours away, the other, maybe 5 hours away, the other direction, you should talk to them and work that out. So the same is true. There's also this group called the Rural Water Association, which has been absolutely fantastic. I never knew there was such a thing, but basically each state has their own association whose job it is to work with some of the smaller, mostly lagoon operators that will, they basically go out and help them because they have, their resources are a bit limited. And so we've actually, for example, we posted last month, where we were out in Illinois. That was all set up through the Illinois Rural Water Association. So great network. This network exists throughout the United States, and there's a national organization. So that's a cheap and easy way for us to sort of leapfrog our way into this industry. Certainly, as we gain more capital, we can increase it more and more. But it's an interesting, a relatively small, tight network.
So I have two questions here that I think are pretty closely related, so I can hit them both at once. One is from Larry Romy, and another one from Nicholas Santoro. The first is talking about, is this applicable in the saltwater environment? The other one was talking about red tides, which are in saltwater as well. And so short of it is we haven't worked in saltwater yet. The most recent job we did for the port, though, was in brackish water. So it's, in the bay, which is saltier than fresh water, but not as salty as the ocean. And so the process work there, likely it will work with saltwater. Mm-hmm. And we are certainly well aware of the red tide happening down in Florida. The red tide itself would be a very large job to do. But a better way to get at that might actually be a lot of the reason, not the only reason, but a lot of the reason for the red tides is simply nutrients. You're feeding the algae just like you're fertilizing your garden. And a lot of that comes from runoff. And it also comes from these wastewater treatment plants that are not working effectively. And so we can actually go in there and help to reduce that by remediating those nutrients at the source. So try to fix the problem before it starts, let's put it that way. The other big thing in Florida is the more freshwater algae that happen. Lake Okeechobee is one of the big ones. There's a lot of different places where they get toxic algae blooms as well. I know the Army Corps of Engineers works on that, so we certainly have our eyes open for potential projects there. So we definitely are aware of those bits. Chris, did you have anything else to?
No, that's good. I'll jump in on the next one. So we got a question here from Tim. It appears that you're working toward product selling model instead of selling a remediation service. Have you considered offering both? And will you consider also installing permanent harvesters at dedicated sites? The answer is yes, absolutely. Again, I want to make it clear we're not drawing any sort of bright lines between the service and the selling model. Quite frankly, if the service model takes off and we're crushing it there, and that seems to be the path that we want to go, we'll certainly increase more emphasis on that. The model that we've built basically shows sort of a continuation of both. We're certainly not talking about, once we're up to a certain point from the service perspective, that we're going to quit servicing and then move into the sales model exclusively. No, it's quite the contrary. We think there are just some basic limitations to this, to actually us providing the service within sort of the certain geography that exists today. However, the one caveat that I would put there is that we're exploring other, I don't want to say franchise models because it's not the right phrase, but we're exploring the potential to partner with other entities that, for example, this contractor that has 150 wastewater facilities that they manage in Illinois, they would be an ideal partner. So we could work with them. Work with them to provide the machines. We could, a variety of different business scenarios that we could work out with them. So I think that works across the board. In terms of permanent installation, absolutely 100% a viable option. In fact, we've been talking to the Maryland Port Administration as being a potential avenue as well. We'll see how that goes. They're kind of bullish right now. So. But great question. Yeah,
the main site operator definitely wants us to build him some containerized systems that he can tote around to different places. So, and we've gotten asked that in a couple different locations. So certainly. All right. So another question here we have coming in the Q&A. So I understand the value of your pivot. Very smart. As to the conversion of biofuel, do you have any concepts that may solve the problem? And this is from, Ryan Wilde. Yeah. Sorry, I have to lean in here because the text is quite small. So short of it is yes. On the HTL side, as I mentioned before, I think our ideal is that we actually let someone else solve those scale up issues. Right. That would be certainly the ideal. We're watching one particular European company that's been making pretty good progress. And so that would be on the HTL side, kind of our ideal. On the kind of feed side over to the, from the harvester over to the HTL, we have an abundance of ideas on how to do that. It all comes down to modifying some of the chemistry and possibly adding in some extra separation steps. But it's one of those things where, having been doing this for a while, it's clear there's not a certain solution just yet. It's going to take some work. It's going to take some digging to get it there, which is why we decided that it's better to change directions than basically kind of work down this direction and then end up having it take much longer than we expected. It's much better if we can get the company to break even, and then we can work on this problem. We kind of can continually hack at it, but it's no longer kind of the make or break sort of thing for the entire company.
Okay. Good. How are we doing on time here?
I think we're doing fairly good. And by the way, you should get a message after this asking for feedback. Please give us feedback. This is our first time doing a webinar. If you have follow-up questions, if there's something you think we can do better, please let us know.
Additionally, to that point, if there are other questions that we don't get to today, please use the discussion side or the discussion section for the Start Engine page. That way, we're obviously not going to get to everything today, but we can get to as much as we can. So let's see. Questions about, can you elaborate on your business model or how your business model would work? What sort of cost margins would you expect for your services? From Justin. I think we covered a big chunk of that in terms of what the business model could look like. In terms of margins, I think certainly from an equipment sales perspective, 35, 40+% margin, we think is reasonable, is certainly doable. I think a comparable margin, probably 30 to 35 on the service side, but that I think will continue to improve as we drive our COGS reduction. That's going to be a big push for us. So I think that's how we see it working out in the future. We're trying to be, when we think about those types of models, we're trying to be very conservative in terms of what would go into that. So I'd rather sort of under promise and over deliver on those. So
we've got a question here about whether we've heard of Avid. And they do electric coagulation, and so so we are aware of them, and we definitely could see potential for collaboration with them. So that would potentially reduce some of our consumable cost. We certainly would have to dig into the technology to make sure everything meshed together nicely. But yeah, we are certainly aware of them, and we would be interested in exploring that more once we have a little bit of time.
There's a question regarding our patent situation from Tamara. So as we said, we've got one patent issued. We're actually in the process of working with our IP attorneys for our second patent, and that specific patent that is, let's see, the first patent that we have is process, right? You want to speak to those a little bit, Ryan?
So the first patent, I believe it's a process.
It's a process patent.
Second patent that's currently pending is on the actual equipment.
Right.
And so we have those going through. The first one's issued, second one's pending, and then we have also trade secrets. Let's see here. Got one question here from Chester, and I know, Chester, we had a little back and forth. Why can't you just cover the stainless steel, the reactor, with a glass interior? I think glass certainly would work, but it would obviously have to be done very, very carefully. Our current reactor design certainly could not handle that because, believe it or not, it uses flexible stainless steel, and that flexible stainless steel actually changes shape when it's pressurized. Tube goes from nice and flexy to rigid. The glass would shatter for sure. There's certainly ways you could do it with piping. You would have to make sure every single stainless steel face was covered up. So certainly possible, but you would have to be careful. Just because if you have one place that gets eaten away that you miss, it's going to be a very, very bad day.
There's another question that popped up about the safe conversion. Just to drive that home again, the Republic safes will not convert automatically. We have to hit a threshold of raising $1 million on this start engine round. That's not, again, to be clear, that's not us. That's not a decision that we're making now. That was actually a prerequisite in your safe agreement with Republic. We wish we could convert today. We would do so, but we got to get to that $1 million before we can. When that does happen, when we do hit that threshold, it will trigger. We will then agree to convert. That's our plan, and then it will trigger a follow-up from Republic. So just to make sure we're clear on that.
Let's see here. We have a question from Aaron. Are you actually creating these manure ponds? Any chance you could clean up any existing industrial, animal, or agricultural excrement ponds? And then a follow-up question of, let's see here, or lakes and ponds that have algae overbloom. Second one's easy. The answer is yes, and we have done it. Let's see here. The first one, we've definitely looked into that. And one demo that we're going to be doing relatively soon will be about as close to that as you can probably get without actually doing it. I will say it's I can tell you the team's really excited about that.
We will be washing the harvester very well when we return. Let's just say that.
So the answer is yes, probably. Believe it or not, probably what it gets down to is making sure there's not any grit or anything in there that causes us some problem. But yeah, it's definitely something we could potentially do.
Okay, scroll up. You want to cover the phosphorus one while we're down there, and then we can scroll up. Talk about that one.
So I got a question here from Justin Greger. You mentioned phosphorus. Does that mean reclamation of phosphorus and other fertilizer components is possible? Short answer is yes, technically. Longer answer is the economics. I think I ran some calcs on it once. We'd have to dig into it further. The economics probably wouldn't be favorable from my memory, just because phosphorus fertilizer is very, very cheap. But that's something we've certainly thought about. We've had other people talk to us about, we can get heavy metals out as well. So we've had conversations about also removing metals and pulling those out. So we've looked into that sort of thing. So that is a kind of a flavor of question that we get a lot of. Okay, so you can remove it, and can you actually, reclaim it, use it again? Let's see here.
Let's see. Is there anything else on there?
I don't know about this one. Let's see here.
It's algae there. Simple one here. Someone was asking, Derek was asking if we're recording this webinar is going to be posted somewhere. Yes, it should be posted on the Start Engine site. It will take, from what I understand, it will take a couple days before it's posted. It needs to go through Start Engine compliance to make sure that we didn't say anything that we shouldn't have. So hopefully, hopefully it'll be posted, and hopefully we won't be getting a nasty note from Start Engine compliance. So
yes,
there are limitations, obviously, in terms of what we can speak to here.
We got a question about, do you know why Exxon gave up on algae fuel? I obviously was not in the boardroom. I have had conversations with Exxon, sitting in rooms with them. Definitely not the most fun meeting I've ever been through, for sure. But if I were to hazard a guess, it's because their algae growth system is, to put it as lightly as I possibly can, a little bit too expensive. The way they grow the algae is kind of a highly controlled way in pretty engineered ponds. And to give you just some frame of reference, Department of Energy has done studies where just the pond liner alone, and the pond liner is thinner than a dime, can wreck your economics on an algal biofuel system. And so if you start adding concrete, pond liners, and lots of other things, it doesn't really help you.
Probably we're at time.
Okay.
I think we're at our 1 hour mark, and we want to be respectful of the time commitment that we agreed to. I apologize for folks who, we still had a couple of questions we didn't get to. We can try to, whether maybe we provide an update or some follow-up conversation, or on the discussion section of our Start Engine page, we can certainly provide that. Ryan and I would like to take the opportunity to thank everyone for your participation. We would also politely ask to give us some feedback. We're contemplating doing more of these, but that's entirely dependent upon the feedback we get today. If it is, don't bother, keep doing what you're doing, and we'll talk to you later, fine. We won't trouble anybody with that going forward. But please give us some feedback on the follow-up questionnaire. We'll try to get back to some of these unanswered questions. And the last thing I would ask is that, Yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't ask for your help here. Obviously, I'm very excited about the opportunity that exists in front of Manta. I can tell you, I am more clear on how we can build a really exciting business here at Manta. I see a clear path, much more so than when I first joined. I'm excited about the progress that we've built and the traction that we've generated in the market. We've learned a heck of a lot, and we need your help to kind of take it to the next level. So if you're on the fence thinking about an investment, please consider. If you've invested and you can't invest any further, understood. What we would ask is do what you can to promote us. Use your network, just talk about us, hopefully favorably. And anything that you can do to spread the word about us would be greatly appreciated. And with that, do you have anything else to add, Ryan?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Very much appreciate your time, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.